Okay, so today we're going to go into another way that you can hopefully use RStudio to make some packed bubble charts. We've talked a little bit about packed bubble charts already and their utility in terms of being able to kind of break down and visualize groups of people and their different categories or scores across one another. So if you remember back to our Tableau video that you have viewed previously in this playlist, we worked with age and work experience as our X and Y variables, and we evaluated them based on regional identification as well as the region that they were born in, and kind of compared them based on the size of the bubbles, and then of course their location is based on where they score on age versus experience on the X and Y axis. So I wanted to show you another way that you can achieve this. Hopefully, I, for some reason, could not get it to plot correctly, but I wanted to walk through the syntax with you anyway, as promised in the previous video. I can show you an application of some sample data that I found online that I ran and also could not get to plot, so I don't know if it's something within my plotting package that's not working, but I think I can still show you what the syntax mean based on a certain data set, and then kind of show you what an output would look like so that you have an idea that it could, it should work on RStudio similarly to as it does on Tableau. So first you want to open up your ggplot that you should have had installed beforehand, as well as Plotly. If not, you'll need to install those packages. And then you want to read this file, and I renamed it FP for Final Project. And then you can view it, which is what this is here, and it's just a very simple, participant number. What is their birth region? What is their age? Their gender? Employment? Whether or not they're a current hire, or whether or not they have, whether or not they have, say, in current hiring situations, their number of years of experience, what region they come from, and then there's a bunch more down in there. As well as their regional identification, which is what we used for our tooltip in Tableau, if you remember correctly. If I remember correctly. So once we have viewed that, we can push into this P command the formula for Plotly. We're going to use the dataset FP. We're going to say that your X is age. That would be your row down here, as similar to what we did in Tableau. Y being experience, which was our column. The text is regional ID, so that's what we want the hover text to display. We want it to be a scatter plot. Not the hover text. The circle itself. It's going to display regional ID. So that's, if we go back to regional ID, that's our north, south, Midwest, and west. And so that's how we would kind of differentiate those items. So we want it to look like a scatter plot because that's kind of what it's based off of, especially in RStudio. And then mode is markers, and markers are kind of how we're differentiating the differences in circles. And so we'll describe that a little bit later in the syntax, but that's the mode that we're using. Then we want the size to be based on gap, which is just a command. The color is based on regional ID, and you could change size to be based on, I actually think maybe that should be size is based on region, and then color is regional ID, and then the colors are paired, which is, to say that they're corresponding to those values. And then marker, you want the opacity to be a certain way, so whether or not you want it to be totally opaque or kind of translucent. How you want the size to be indicated is by diameter. And then when we get to layout, you want there to be a title at the top of the plot, which is age by experience. And then We did not want to have grid lines for the x-axis or the y-axis because it's not technically, I mean, it is a scatter plot, but it's not the emphasis that we're placing on the relationship of the plot. So we put false for both of those so it didn't show up. And then I have show legend as false here. You could certainly add a legend, a click legend like we have in some of the previous assignments. That wouldn't be new knowledge for you, but you could certainly add one if you wanted to. And then, like I've used before, my clear workspace command just to kind of like clear everything and make sure that before we get started that no artifacts are remaining. So, I mean, I'll go ahead and run this, but I have a bunch of different times and I have not been successful. Let's double check. No miracles here today, but as you can see, I don't necessarily have any error messages. This parsed with column specification, I looked that up and it didn't seem to be an error message. It more so was just indicating that birth region was an integer, age was an integer, and as you can see here, they all were integers except for regional ID, which is correct here because they have it as a character. But you know, other than that, I couldn't necessarily find anything that was an issue. And when I went to find some sample syntax online to show you different types, I could not get it to successfully run even with the data set they provided. But I'll kind of talk you through what the Plotly features do and how they work. And it begins with a simple bubble chart, just like the commands we just gave. So as you can see, there's no differentiation here between color for categories or anything like that. So then you can set the markers, and so that's how we could, you know, if we wanted to have markers, we could have, you know, what is their value of X and Y in the tooltip. And then we could set multiple colors, which, you know, as you can see here, there's different ones, and more than anything, we're going to want the color variables to be categorical. So for in this instance, so we would use this syntax like we used previously, and that would help us to depend it based on, you know, the variable such as regional identification, which is what we wanted it to be based on. And it kind of shows you that there. And then you can change the size of the bubbles on the bubble charts. And then you can influence the hover text as well, which is similar to the tooltip feature in Tableau. So even when I tried to run each of these individually or together, every shape and form, I couldn't get them to run on my RStudio. Granted, I seem to have issues with RStudio, but hopefully, at the very least, this has given you some sort of indication as to what the type of syntax is, what it means, and how you could potentially get it to work for you. So hopefully, you see that as an option. I personally think that in this type of data visualization, it's simpler to use Tableau because the options are more user-friendly, whereas here, the code is what gets in our way, you know, at least in this instance with this plot. But hopefully you got some information from this and you learned how to do it 2 different ways.